Welcome to Wilder. Today, I'm honored to be joined here by Josh Lichter, who has recently been hitting my YouTube feed and catching me off guard with his work. Josh, nice to have you on. Tell me a little bit about why you choose to leave as much room for silence as you do in your work on YouTube.
Yeah, I definitely want to create things that I feel like I would want to watch, and I definitely want these long pauses to, I don't want to sound like crazy, but like to let the video breathe. Like I want like my audience to have a second to like sit back and process and see the content and kind of maybe have their eyes wander from like one frame to the next or anything like that. I want it to be a little bit slower. My overall goal with my videos are to be calming, relaxing, bring my audience into a place or a destination or an animal that they might not usually be able to see. So I definitely want it to be like a serene, calm moment.
Yeah, that's really good. I feel like, on YouTube as creators, we were talking before we started recording even, we talk a lot about, how to craft a story, how to create an engaging type of film or video, right? A lot of times creating an engaging video is perceived as only being, fast paced, lots of action, all of that stuff. Clearly, you're able to show in a lot of your videos that engagement doesn't necessarily have to look that way. How do you feel like you're able to still like engage an audience, even knowing that you are creating more space to breathe, kind of as you talked about?
It's funny that you say that because like even in my own brain, I always think like, does this need to be faster paced? Do I need to like have voiceover? So even in my own brain, I like struggle with, is this engaging enough? But I think as long as, like I come into it with the idea of, is this something that I would want to watch, and watching other people's work and like kind of tailoring like how I want my videos to be. It always came back to I loved slower paced videos and I loved longer clips and a little bit more like ambient sounds, like ASMR type stuff. So I definitely wanted it to be a little bit more like that than it would be without.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, when I think of your videos, I definitely think of, you mentioned ASMR. I definitely think of a lot of natural sounds for sure. And so that's really cool it makes your videos in particular stand out quite a bit, in my opinion. In one of your most recent films, you talked about deciding to kind of put the camera down during the last part of your vlog and just finish the evening off by sitting and watching the sunset and the rams kind of out in front of you in the field. How does that type of perspective mold your wildlife photography and even your creator career as a wildlife photographer?
Yeah, so I think it's important to always like stick to your roots. I think it has helped me in this journey to remember why I do it in the first place. And the reason I'm out there to begin with is that I want to be out there with these animals. I want these experiences. Like the YouTube creator side of it is I want to bring my audience with me on all of these amazing trips. But sometimes you're out there and you're just so focused on either getting that great shot or getting the great B-roll that you lose sight of like what you're actually doing in the field or in the woods or whatever. So I definitely wanted to remember like I am here to spend these time and these moments with the animals, and I don't want to forget that. So in my mind, I was like, okay, they're eating. I already have tons of clips of them eating. There's nothing else that I really need. I would rather just shut it all down, spend 20 minutes sitting there, just enjoying the moment and remembering the whole reason I'm there in the first place. And as that is just sharing these moments in time with these animals that no one else is there sharing it with me. I'm just me and animals and just like a little glimpse into their life. And it's just like so important for me.
Being present. Yeah, totally. Yeah. One of the biggest reasons for me why I always bring a second shooter with me on my wildlife photography adventures that I film is I have two big reasons for that. Number one, I love the level of production quality that it's able to bring, my experience in my video, which is the obvious one.
Yeah.
But the second one that's not so obvious that maybe not everyone would think of is that it allows me to be so much more present out in the field, because when, I went through years as well of the filming myself and all of that stuff. And, just like having to think about like, okay, set up a tripod here, set up a tripod there, like get this shot, like, taking double as long to get the walking shot as if you would have just walked there in the first place, all that stuff is like, it pulled me a lot out of the moment. And one of the ways to immerse myself back in that moment was by not worrying about that and just having someone else take care of that. And so for me, that's why, even though I have to spend money on it, depending on who's filming for me, sometimes my wife helps me, sometimes it's someone else. It's so worth it to me, because for me, it really allows me to be much more immersed and present in the moment. So I love that you were, talking about that. Something I think is interesting is like, because we're talking about slowness. I think that, showing that rawness and authenticity, like you and me have very different styles of how we create a video, right? But there was a phase I went through when I felt like, first of all, I went through a phase where everything was way too slow and disengaging. And videos were just really boring. Like I look back at my earliest videos and I'm like, oh God, like I would not watch that if someone paid me money right now.
No, it's terrible. Yeah. Terrible, right?
Yep. So I appreciate everyone who stuck through that with me for all these years. Like I went through that phase, and it took a while to like figure out more of my voice and how to like create a more engaging story. And then I went through the opposite phase where like I felt like I had to do everything really energetic and really fast, and it was just too much. Like it was jarring, it was confusing, it wasn't me. And now I feel like I've gotten much, again, still always am growing, just like you. I love that you said that, like it's a constant growth, but I feel like I'm at a place now where like I'm much more settled in my identity of how I like to create a video and create a film and the art of that. And something that's interesting I've noticed is like, I do like to have a lot of energy, and I do like to have a good, decent pace for most parts of my video. Not hyper fast, but a decent pace. And then I noticed that I really like having just a few subtle moments where like I'll pull back and like it'll just like it'll feel like you're almost getting sucked into a void of like, boom, now I'm present in the moment. We're just gonna sit here for a second. And so if a lot of my viewers might notice, like in maybe about half of my videos, maybe a little bit more than that, there will usually be some sort of moment that is like the moment in the video where I just like stop, and it's like a 2-minute extended scene. And like everything up to that point is like cutting every 4 seconds, cutting, something like that. Yeah. And then it's like I get to the moment where it's like in real life, I had this incredible moment with nature, and now it's like, my words can't quite explain this moment. So like, let's just slow down and listen to it for a second and see it. Yeah. And so, there's definitely like a lot of value to creating engagement in that type of a way with slowness and presence. But something else that I found that's interesting, and sorry, I'm going off on a tangent here.
No, I love it.
But, something that like, in my earlier days, or when I went through kind of like, I guess, what am I trying to say? Long story short, a lot of times I'll get comments from people, or I have gotten comments over the years where it's like, man, I wish you would have shown more photos like in your sequence, or I wish you would have let your photos show for like 8 seconds, 10 seconds on screen. And I used to do that, and I would notice that my retention graphs at those times would just plummet, because even though a few people might want that, most people, it's like, okay, that's too slow. That's too like, that's okay. Like we've digested this frame enough, So I've gotten from like a place where I used to show like 10 images at the end of my video to where it's like, now I show like the final 2 to 4 and like, maybe 3 seconds each. And if people really want, they can pause or whatever. But, it's interesting to see how slowness interacts with engagement and all of that. So I love everything you shared there. Yeah. So.
Well, thanks. I think it's definitely like a stylistic choice. And I also think it's important to have your videos represent your personality. So like I watch your videos and I think you're a more of a energetic guy than I am. Like I think that you're way more like charismatic and like you're ready to talk and everything like that. And it's like for me, I'm personally a little bit more reserved, a little bit quieter. Like obviously there's times where I like get hyped up, but I want my video to like show and feel like my personality.
Totally.
Because like there's a billion people out there taking photos, and it's like I want to show them who I am, because I think that people will resonate with like my personality. And obviously like people that watch your videos might watch mine and be like, my God, they are so boring and slow. Will this guy talk for once? So it's like there's so many, there's like the viewership, there's so much diversity in like what people want to see, which is great about YouTube, because it allows, me to have a viewer base and you to have a viewer base, and we might, mesh up, and they might have a little bit of overlap, but it might not always be that case.
Yeah. That's awesome. I love that you shared that. And I'm going to go home today and tell my wife that I was called charismatic today. So I haven't gotten a compliment like that in a while.
The young people call it Riz.
Yeah, so the Riz.
You got the Riz.
Apparently. I'm not that hip. Yeah, I'm sometimes like my wife works with the youth at our church a lot, and she'll like come home with like their lingo, and I'm like, I have no idea what that means right now. So that's good. I love that.
Oh my gosh.
We'll get back to the guests in less than 30 seconds, but I wanted to take a brief moment to let you know about Wilder's brand new newsletter that's available to sign up to right now. This newsletter contains monthly news about wildlife photography and creators relevant to you, and contains a monthly gear discount available exclusively to the newsletter subscribers. The Wilder Leaflet will also be a place I send out updates about our annual live photo competition for our $1,000 grand prize. And I'll also be giving away free things at the newsletter, starting with a free downloadable PDF and JPEG to use as a cheat sheet out in the field. If any of this sounds interesting to you, head over to our website link in the description below and subscribe. Man, so speaking of analytics, how much do you find yourself as a creator paying attention to analytics?
Too much. I should be spending way less time on it. I think the more I make, the less I look at it. Like obviously I'll look at like click-through rate, average duration, things like that, and kind of like base like how it's going to go off of that. But early on, I realized that my analytics were telling me that as soon as I talked on a video, people turned it off, and I had a huge dip. And it's like, I'm never going to talk then. Like, no one wants to see my face. I'm never going to talk. So, like,
like, am I ugly or what? Yeah.
God, I know. It's like, I'm not the most attractive. I'm not Brad Pitt here. Yeah. But, like, good. But, just feeling like I never wanted to shape my content, and I let it for a while and like trying to limit it. And lately I've been coming a little bit more into how I want it to be. And it's like, yeah, if I'm going to talk, I'm going to talk. And if people don't want to watch it, they don't have to watch it. That's a great thing about YouTube. You can just turn it off. Like, obviously it makes me feel terrible inside when I see a huge dip as soon as my face pops up. But if that's a great thing, they can turn it off. But other than that, I try not to look too much. I do a little bit of research on keywording and like what people are searching, and then obviously like what my viewers search for, things like that. Yep. But other than that, I try to just like let it be, see how it goes. Every now and then, if I have a bad click-through rate, I'll change my thumbnail and see if like that helps a little bit. But I try to spend as little time as possible, because I really don't want it to affect like my end product. Like I definitely want it to be authentically me and not shaped by some algorithm.
I think it's for me personally, I love that you shared that. So thank you so much for sharing that. I feel like it's hard finding the balance, because I think of it a lot, because I do have very much a business mindset also with my creation, which is my art. I think of it a lot on like, what is not a big deal and what is a big deal. So in my art, what is really important to me that I stay true to my art in, and what is like, and what is not so important, I can hold more loosely. And then also a lot of times, just like what is a lot of times the analytics are very helpful for figuring out like genuinely how I can improve in some ways. So
Yeah.
for example, I used to have a lot of times in my videos where like I'd be going in the video showing wildlife, and then I'd like cut to like a tripod angle. I'd walk up to the tripod and then talk to the camera. And I noticed that those were same thing, huge dips in them, because they are like a scene transition where it's like I'm pulling someone out of a moment. Now I'm resetting them.
Yeah.
Now it's like kind of like a moment where like now they feel like they're almost being forced to like come and sit down to me and like listen to me rant or something. Versus now a lot of times with my talking in episodes, I've discovered that if I don't give that transition, if I just am like in the moment taking the shot and then I start immediately talking about what I'm seeing and why it's relevant and saying whatever I have to say there, my dips are very small now, like if at all in some situations, because it feels so naturally a part of the scene. So that was one way of like looking at those analytics. It was like, oh, that's actually useful information. And I've been able to discover through that, like how to improve my work. And then there's some things like, for example, like titling was a really hard one for me to let go for a long time. I really wanted to title all of my films like cinematic movies and like, have them, as like a set and branded and everything. And I discovered like it just led to horrible click-through rates and was inhibiting my growth from reaching the full potential of what it could have been in terms of the amount of people that I reach. And so being willing to sacrifice my titles, which at the end of the day is not a very big like thing artistically, like if I could get an extra, if someone tells me you can get an extra 5,000 like people that watch your video and interact with your content and your art that you created just simply by changing your title from something you would have preferred, I'm like, heck yeah, I'm willing to do that. So it just took me a while to like be okay with that. But once I was like, I'm okay with that. And that's a way that I'm willing to sacrifice that doesn't feel like a big deal to me really at the end of the day. So it's all about, I feel like, finding like what are those compromises you're willing to make that the majority of people would like to see. And what are things that like, this is true to me and like, I am not willing to sacrifice that, and this is the art that I want to create. Yeah. So it's a hard balance.
It is. And it's really interesting. And like, I will give YouTube all the props in the world. Like their analytics are incredible. In depth. Like it's incredible. And what's funny is that like you were saying about your title and how like changing your title can really affect it. And I learned really early on by doing all of this research that people like my thumbnail, I would usually try to put the animal in it because like in my mind I was like,
you want to see the animal,
yeah. Like they're here for the wildlife. But if I put me and my camera as the thumbnail, like the click-through rate was double. And it's like, why do people want to look at me? Like, first, they obviously told me they don't want to because my analytics tell me they drop off when they see my face. Yeah. So what is actually happening here? But if I put me, my camera on the thumbnail, I get a really great click-through rate. And it's like, in my mind, I would much rather have it be the animal because like that's really what this is all about. But again, the analytics are telling me like push it that way. And it's just so interesting because like everything that it tells you and like all of the research that you can do, like it's incredible. And I really think like thumbnailing and titling are the two Achilles heels for almost everybody in the wildlife aspect. Like very old school way of like photographed birds, and it's like, it needs to be a little bit more like, add some pizzazz in there.
Totally. Yeah. Thumbnails and titles. Like the creator cohorts that I run where I teach people on how to be wildlife photography creators, I tell them that like literally like, so I tell them that, and I actually mentioned this in another podcast that's going to be released this month. So sorry for you guys watching that it's redundant, but I say that, I tell my students that, you can't wrap a bad product to make it look good, aka you can't make a bad video much better by wrapping it really nicely. But what you can do is you can wrap a really nice video, a really good product, very poorly and make it look a lot worse. So it's so important to like be able to represent that well in your thumbnail and title and really wrap it well. That way people are intrigued enough to get to the product, which is actually important. So I love that.
Yeah. No, it's incredible.
Yeah. I want to dive a little bit more into the art in your films and wildlife photography again in a second. But first, I wanted to talk a little bit about Yellowstone and the Tetons, since I know you have a lot of content there, have spent a significant amount of time there. and it's a very unique place to do wildlife photography. What do you like about doing wildlife photography in the Yellowstone area? And what are some of the things that you feel like it falls short in when you're kind of experiencing that there?
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to be honest. I love Yellowstone. I went for the very first time last July, and we absolutely fell in love with it. The idea of it, they call it like the Serengeti of the United States, and it truly is. Like, I have never in my life experienced so many different species living, like coexisting together than in Yellowstone. I mean, the Lamar Valley is something that I truly believe every human that lives in the United States should experience at least once in their life. It's phenomenal, watching the bison herds and watching all the pronghorns and the coyotes just like living and coexisting within the bison. It's just absolutely phenomenal. I love shooting there. Now, some of the negatives are obviously the amount of people. Like in my mind, I want to be extremely, extremely selfish and say, like, I want these one-on-one experiences.
Yourself,
I want it to be just me and this bear. But unfortunately, that's just not the reality in Yellowstone or the Tetons. And I definitely think that the crowds can be a deterrent, especially because I don't want to feel like paparazzi. Like we did our very first trip to the Tetons, I want to say like a year and a half, 2 years ago, before I started YouTube. And it was phenomenal, but everyone was looking for $3.99, and it was like a NASCAR race with like all these photographers just like sitting around and waiting. It was insane. Yeah. And it's like it's like the purist in me, right? And it's the selfishness that I just think like I don't want to sit around and take the exact same photo that like everyone else is taking. I'd rather like go out and do my own thing. And actually, real quick story, it was amazing. So everyone was waiting for $3.99 in the Tetons, and it was just tons of people. And my wife and I were there, and we were like, you know what, like, I don't want to be a part of this. Let's just drive around. And we drove around a little bit, and we found this female moose laying in like a pasture, a little bit below us. So we got out, and we just sat and watched her for like 45 minutes, and she was just laying down, and we were like, gonna be like, okay, like, let's pack up and go. And she got up and she gave birth to a calf, like right in front of us.
Wow.
Right in front of us. So we were like, oh my God, what is happening? And then she had twins, like another one came out. So we literally get to witness this baby, these two baby moose literally come into this world and like take their first steps. And all I thought was like, if I just would have said, no, I have to see $3.99 and take the same photo that everyone took, I would have missed out on this amazing experience, like watching this female moose give birth to these beautiful little babies. So it's just, if your goal in life is to see $3.99, like, or that experience, and you need to be there, like, I totally get it. But also not being afraid to be like, you know what, I might miss out on $3.99, but I also might see something else. And that's the great thing about the Greater Yellowstone Ecosystem, right, is what they call it, part of the Tetons and all that, is the diversity and what you can see is awe-inspiring. Like, I could not believe everything that you could see there. I live in Wisconsin, and if I see a deer that I can take a photo of once a week, like, I'm doing good. I'm doing good. And, going to Yellowstone, and it's like, my God, like,
it's a field day.
We got to the point where we're turning down bison, where something before that, I'd be like, oh my God, it's a bison, and taking a photo of it, we're like, oh, it's just bison. It's just baby bison crossing the river,
No big deal.
Like, it's crazy.
Yeah.
No big deal. It's just every day.
Yeah.
It's
I
amazing.
love that. That's so cool. Yeah. When I went there last summer to meet up with Evan, my favorite moment of the whole trip. So I got really close with one of the grizzly bears there, and her name was Bonita. And I got closer to her later on in the video, but at the end of when I did the 2-part series, at the end of the first part where I cut it off, that was actually my favorite moment of the whole trip in Yellowstone, even though I didn't get as good of a photo there, because in that moment, I'm there and it's like that craziness that you're talking about. It's all the photographers around you. And that's a new experience for me where I'm literally the only wildlife photographer, it feels like, in like hundreds of miles around me. And so, so it's like a totally different experience for me. And I'm like, whoa, this is weird. It feels like congested and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And then, so a combination of two things happened. Number one, up the road, like just a half mile up the road, people were kind of waiting on Grizzly 399 to come out and hoping that she would come out. And the people who had left to come photograph Bonita right next to me had left because, you know, it was only a half mile down the road and it was probably worth it to them. But when the rain came out and it started just pouring down, everyone was like, it's not worth it. Let's go back to wait for $3.99. And I was the only one that was waiting there. So it was literally just like me and the one ranger next to me and the bear right there. And I was just, that was so cool. And because of that, the ranger was also more like comfortable with like, you can get a little closer. He was like with me, you know, because it's not a huge crowd to manage. So he let me get like way closer than when it was with the whole crowd. It was just such a cool moment. And having that kind of special, intimate moment to myself felt so much more rewarding than like if I, you know, would have been over there just waiting, like you said. And to each their own. But yeah.
Oh yeah, no, totally. And it's like, if that's your goal and like you were like, I'm going to Yellowstone or the Tetons because I want to see 399. Like, hey man, like that's totally like, please feel free. But it's just like not the experience that I necessarily like would like to have.
Yeah.
And I definitely want to give a shout out to the Rangers because they do such a phenomenal job. They really manage everything. And their ultimate goal is always like the safety of the animal, which is, I love. I absolutely love it. You know, it's like, I love that they can manage all the humans and like always have the animal's well-being at like the forefront of their brain.
Yep. Yeah, they do an amazing job. I've never seen rangers as impressive as Yellowstone Tetons. Yep.
Right?
So
yeah, it's amazing.
I love that.
Yeah. So
diving back a little bit into YouTube, you started your YouTube journey a little bit over 2 years ago. What kind of inspired you to do so?
So this is gonna be a little long-winded, so I'm just gonna apologize to everyone now that it's be terribly boring. So before I was a photographer, I was in law enforcement. And I was a cop, I was deputy sheriff. And I would sit at night, I was third shift, and, you know, like 4 or 5 in the morning, there's nothing going on. So I would just sit on YouTube and I would watch like Warren Hilmer and Thomas Heaton and like all of these guys. And I would just dream of the day that I could maybe go to like one of these locations and like see these animals that they're seeing and just dream of it someday. And I was miserable in my job. And I had decided, like, I need to get out and I need to do something else. So we built our wedding photography company. I left to do wedding photography. My wife shortly quit her job after that to do wedding photography with me. And then once it was, I want to say, like, self-sustaining, right? Like, it's never self-sustaining. But once it was strong enough, I just thought, like, if I'm ever going to do this, it's now. I need to do it. I don't want to live the rest of my life in regret, thinking like what could have been. I am definitely someone that is willing to take that risk, maybe more than I should at times. I'm willing to just jump with both feet in, no worries. But I just wanted to try to make it work. And, you know, starting out like anybody, I made a video. It was like a few months until I made another one, and then a few months until I made another one. But just like the journey and what I've learned about myself and what I've learned about what I want to see has changed so much since then that it's really been like transformative, even in my own personal life of like how I live my life is like how I learned from starting this YouTube channel.
I love that. That's super cool. Yeah. You were inspired by other creators before you and wanted to kind of, follow along in it. Yeah.
I would just watch it, you know, and be like, wow, I'm going to sit in this squad car and die someday. Yeah. You know, like, I don't want that for my life. Like, these guys are out here having these amazing experiences and seeing all these amazing things. And it's just like, I want that to be me. I want to experience what they're experiencing.
What makes your photos, your wildlife photography photos or your wildlife photography content? We talked about it a little bit, but what do you feel like makes that unique as opposed to other wildlife photography creators?
So on the technical side of it, I personally believe that I don't know if could really call myself like a photographer anymore. My real drive and passion is like the video aspect of it. So I still take a few photos, but I think what separates me is like I'm trying very hard to do like production level quality video for wildlife, where I feel like a lot of people see wildlife video as like a secondary of like how am I going to tell my story of like how I took this photo. Like I need a little bit of video on that, where my primary focus is taking the video, and if I have a second to switch it to photo mode and take a few photos, I will, but then I switch right back to video. And I'm like, if it's a great moment, I want it to be on video. I don't want to take a photo. Like I want my viewers to see that through video over photo. Yeah. And that's just my personal, like how I like it. I think video kind of tells like a little bit more of a story than photo can. Yeah. Granted, photos tell great stories, but I personally like editing and feeling like the emotion through a video slightly more than I take photos.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. That's good. Yeah, you're totally right. I think almost all people perceive it as photos first, video second. And that's a constant battle that I know I have with myself is like, what am I doing in this moment? Am I doing video or photo? I've thought a lot about like someday I hope that we can get to the point where we have really good, it's going to be incredibly expensive too, but like we have really, I guess like that's part of it is like an affordable, good camera that can record raw video files. So that way I could just take frames from those raw video files, and also be able to do all the things that a wildlife photographer would normally do, right? Because you have cameras that can do that, but they're not really wildlife photography. Like that's not what they're built for too much. And there's a lot of factors, but
so okay. So like this is going to be a little geeky. I don't talk a lot about equipment. I love equipment. I don't talk a lot about it. So I am using the Canon R3 for my main wildlife, and it is absolutely ridiculous. And anybody that is listening right now that is in the video knows that I am absolutely insane. But I record everything in 6K 60 frames per second raw. So all of my footage is raw footage. So I can pull those stills. Yeah. It's like over a gig a second. Like it's insane. Like I take so much footage. Like I just did a trip and it was like 4 terabytes of raw data. Wow. Just for these like 4 videos. And it's insane. I know it's very expensive. But again, I got it for that capability that if I ever want to pull a still frame out of it, I still get that raw image.
I love that.
And I can use it for video. Again, I have so much money invested in hard drives. It's insane. But yeah, it's. I think it's close though. I think the technology is like really, really close. Yeah. And I know it'll upset a lot of photographers, but even in like my main job is weddings. I definitely see at some point the idea of a traditional photographer and videographer dying. And eventually it's going to be mostly all photography. Yeah. Yeah. So it'll be all videography, all video, and then you'll pull stills out of it.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. Personally. Yeah, I love that. You literally are doing what I've like wanted to do for so long, but I've just never been willing to do it, and mostly because of the financial aspect. Yeah, I can't imagine what you're spending on hard drives. But that's super cool. That's really cool. I love that. So to switch it up for a second, I want to ask you a reverse question. So I'm for this month, I'm trying out kind of asking a reverse question in each podcast.
Love it.
So for me, when you're thinking about my type of storytelling and videos that I create, what do you like about my more active style of storytelling as opposed to yours? And what don't you like about it? So I'd love to hear both of those two answers.
Yeah, so obviously, we've talked about it a little bit in the previously, but I think the engagement aspect is so much better. Like watching yours, it's fast moving. There's always like talking, you're always explaining what's happening. And I really like that because I think it brings the viewer into that moment and like understanding exactly what is happening. Where on my aspect, I need to try and show the viewer what's happening. Well, not so much talking because I don't do voiceover. Maybe someday I will. But I try to tell that story with like frames and video and like sequences. But for you, it's just like I'm doing this, and then we found this, and then I went here, and I just love it because I think it's way more engaging for people, and it's easier to watch. For me, it's like you need to sit down and be like, watch every frame and be like, okay, where is he now? What is he doing? But with you, they like, okay, it's an easier watch for people than it is for me.
Yeah.
Now, personally, on the negative aspect of it, I think not so much like your content, but I think the idea of like fast paced and fast movement is, I think people can get fatigued of it. I think that like it's just so much in their brain and they can just get like overloaded and like burnt out from it.
Yeah.
So at least in my own brain, that's how it is. Like, especially like, I don't know if you're on TikTok, but like scrolling through TikTok, like it's quick. And then after a little while, it's like, my brain is mushy.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know how to think
Don't even
anymore.
know what you watched.
So, right. So I feel like that it can kind of get to that point where for mine, maybe I'll lull them to sleep with my slow movements and my like classical music. But I don't think I'll ever like overstimulate someone with like what I do. But
totally.
And again, that's the great thing about YouTube is like we can have very different styles. And if we ever do a video together, like we can shoot the same content.
Yeah.
But totally different viewpoints and totally different styles, which is what I love about it.
Totally. Yeah. For myself, I've definitely seen like people or videos that I've made where when I was in that era that I was talking about, where it was like I was just trying to really push through everything and like super, focused on the pace at like too fast of a pace. Even if like the engagement wouldn't suffer quite as much, which actually in reality the engagement would suffer more if I'm so much that way. But even if the engagement wasn't the most noticeable difference, what I notice even more is just people's connection with the content. So less likes, less subscribes, less stuff like that, and less comments that are more connected with it. Versus when I've gotten to a better pace of where I'm at now, where I'm able to like move through a faster scene into a slower scene and like find that balance a lot better. It has allowed me to get a lot more of that deeper connection with my audience, I feel like. And so,
I love that.
So yeah, definitely. I love what you shared. Those are two very good things, that you shared. So really cool. Appreciate you sharing that.
Speaking of your video, I watched one earlier where you showed this very long clip of the sandhill cranes, like circling down, I believe.
Yeah.
I think you were shooting like with the 135.
Yep.
And it was just like so beautiful. And I loved the length of it. I love how long it was. I did. But that's my own brain. Like I like those like long clips. It's just like so beautiful and tells just like such a story.
Yeah. Yeah. Good to hear. I love hearing that. Thanks for sharing. Yeah. That moment was just like so cool. I felt like on the 135, because you see sandhill cranes, in videos all the time up close when you see people's wildlife video work. But like, seldom do I feel like you just sit back and you see like that, like coming in for the landing. And I was like, oh man, that moment's just so good. And I love that about that 135 lens. But yeah, so I'm glad that you like that too. Yeah. That's, I'm enjoying hearing that. So yeah. So what's next for you with your wildlife photography? Any new types of content that you're trying to do, or any new ways of doing things, or mostly just new projects you have going on?
So I really lately have been like trying to test out a lot of different types of videos to see how people engage. And again, this is like comes back to the whole like analytics thing of like, should I really be letting, my viewers dictate what my videos are? But I like to test out to kind of see like what people are resonating with a little bit more.
Totally.
So my last video was all about bison. And what I did is I wanted it to be like talking in the beginning and then like nothing after that. And now my next video that comes out on Saturday is all about, I found these coyotes hunting a prairie dog town in like crazy fog. So I actually don't talk at all during it. It is all like ASMR and then music overlay and then short. So I wanted to see like maybe if it was shorter, if like it would affect my analytics at all, and see kind of like how people like resonate and feel with it. So I'm kind of like testing all these things out, and mostly I'm just trying to like level up my video aspect and my video quality. And obviously shooting 6K 60 RAW is absolutely insane. But just trying to, like smoother transitions, smoother panning shots, just trying to like one step at a time. I would love to do a little bit more like nature sounds, which obviously are very difficult to do,
Yeah.
especially with cameras that are focusing. Like I can always hear my lens through my microphone, so trying to figure
You have to
all of
mount
that
it
out is
separate.
just
Yeah.
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 It's an ordeal,
Yeah.
but
Totally. I love that. Yeah. Yeah. I feel like sometimes they're like, yeah, it's just good to figure out what what you're wanting to create and stuff. So I don't see that there's anything wrong with, trying to look at the analytics, trying to figure out like, is this what I like? Is this what resonates with my audience? And so I love that you're doing that right now.
yeah,
Yeah. That's good.
yeah.
So
Thanks. We'll see how it goes.
yeah, totally. I've loved getting to talk with you today. As I asked to everyone that I always like to interview, I like to close out with what they think if they had to pick one single thing, what is the most important thing as a wildlife photographer to either have as a skill or to understand or to, take action on or whatever it may be? What's the single most important thing to your wildlife photography?
So some people might think this is either a cop out or too spiritual, something like that. But I definitely believe that the one important thing is having respect for the animals that you are photographing. And the very first important thing on every wildlife photographer's mind is what I'm doing ethical and not harming the animals that I'm photographing. I unfortunately in our field there's a lot of unethical behavior, and I think that it is not necessarily a plague in our field, but I don't think people think of it as much as they should. And I think that they do unethical behavior to get that perfect shot or the perfect video, or they don't realize what they're doing, whether it's baiting owls or using like mating sounds to like bait an owl in, or, I was in the Tetons and a lady left her camera in a field.
I saw that. Yeah.
And we thought that she did it on accident, but then to come out that people believe that she's doing it on purpose to get that photo of the moose like attacking her camera. And it's like, if you think that like that is what you need to do to take these photos, like you are in it for the wrong reasons.
Yeah.
And as long as everyone just cares about the animal first and foremost, and then the second most important thing is getting that photo or that video, I think we'll be much better off. And I think it's just a way to address the issue that we currently have.
Yeah. Yeah. That's good. Remembering some of the deeper reasons of why you're there. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's the same thing of like, here in Wisconsin, you guys probably don't get like crazy cold, but here in Wisconsin, like I was doing owls and it was like -35, -40 degrees.
Ooh.
And just the thought of like, I can't chase them, right? Like I can't, like if they perch up, I can't go get them and like get them to lose their perch. Cause like if they're hunting, it's very cold. They need all those calories. So just being cognizant of being like, I need to respect them. Like, yeah, you can stand there and as long as they're okay with you and you're not affecting their hunting habits or anything like that, then it's great. But like, I'll never like go chase an owl if it's that cold. Now, granted, different locations, everything's a little bit different. But just having that like forethought of, is what I'm doing affecting them negatively in any way? And if it is, should I be doing it?
Yeah, totally. And I think, like you said, two things. Number one, like locations, it's always so important to keep in mind. Every like specific scene is different, right? So like where you can get, like super close up with, deer in Yellowstone Teton area or whatever, like in where I'm at in California, or actually let's just take what I'm most familiar with. Kings Canyon National Park is close by to us. And at Kings Canyon, there's a meadow there where at the one meadow, the deer are just used to the people around them. Like you could almost touch them. I'm not saying you should touch them, but you could almost touch them. And it would be like, it wouldn't bother them in the slightest. But then, you go like, if I go 10 miles away from that meadow and see a deer in the middle of the forest there, like that deer does not want me anywhere closer. Right. So totally different between those scenarios. And the second thing that I think that makes ethics hard in wildlife photography is that it also, like, I feel like you need experience to really understand what you're interacting with. like at
Yeah.
the beginning days of me doing what I did, I just simply wasn't aware that at the very beginning, let's go back all the way to the beginning. Like I wasn't aware
Yeah.
if a waterfowl's like turning and swimming away from you, that means like stop following me, right? Or things like that.
Right.
And obviously it's something that's, pretty easy to learn, but there's so many nuances that are way more complex than that. And being able to pick up on this is an indication
Yep.
like, hey, like relax or stop doing what you're doing. Or this is an indication of like, yeah, you're comfortable here, so it makes it tricky. Yeah.
Yeah. No, it really is, and it's so true, especially like I photograph bison a lot, right? So I just went to South Dakota, and like understanding like what their movements and their grunts kind of like mean.
Yeah.
And if it's like a natural grunt or if it's like you're way too close grunt or things like that, I think it's important for people, like you said, to have the experience to know exactly what does this animal want me to do right now?
Yeah.
Are they okay? Are their ears moving all over the place? Are their ears back? Like what's going on?
Yeah.
So it's interesting.
Totally.
Yeah. I'm glad you said that.
Yeah, I have a pet cockatiel. That's one of my best buddies, and she hangs out with me all around the house. Like she's not locked in her cage all day. I'm not super down for that. But she's I interact with her all the time for hours a day. And I love getting to interact with her because it teaches me so much about like how birds, like obviously each specific species is going to be different in every scenario, but I learned a lot of general things from her that I'm able to apply to like birds out in the field where like, I'm like, I noticed that like certain behaviors, I'm like, oh, that's like an indication that she's comfortable with me, right? Or this is an indication that she's like wanting to get to that food down there or whatever. And so it helps me when I'm out in the field, like with birds being able to identify like, am I in their space? Like, am I right where they're wanting to feed? Are they comfortable right now? All that stuff. So yeah.
That's so interesting. I never even thought that like you could learn so much from even like having a pet bird. That's that's incredible.
Yeah. So yeah, I love it. But it was good getting to talk with you today, and really appreciated a lot of the things you had to share. And thought
thanks for having me on.
A lot of the stuff you shared was valuable. So
thanks for having me. I honestly really appreciate it. I enjoyed talking with you. And when I'm in California, I'm gonna send you a message and be like, yo, show me where these birds are.
Yeah, totally. We'll get you into the bird side of things. Yeah.
Please do.
Thank you all for watching. If you'd like to see more from Josh, make sure to head over to his channel, Fox and Fur, in the description below. To celebrate the launch of Wilder this month, I'm releasing a series of 3 interviews with prominent wildlife photography YouTubers. So make sure you subscribe below and turn on notifications if you want to make sure that you get to see those. And make sure you subscribe to the Wilder Leaflet that's brand new as well in the description. I'll see you next time.